Okay, so a product footprint is very similar to a corporate footprint. It's just looking at the product level. So it's looking at all of the environmental impacts associated with the life cycle of a product. And that includes the raw material extraction, the transportation, processing of materials, the production stage emissions, the ongoing transportation, the retail stage impacts, consumer use, and end-of-life disposal. That's the whole life cycle of the product. And so in a product footprint, you would look at all of the impacts through that chain to give you an overall sense of the environmental impact of that product. And product footprints can be truncated or subdivided, and sometimes you see what are called cradle-to-gate carbon footprints or environmental footprints, and they just look at all of the impacts within a subset of the overall life cycle. So from raw material extraction through to the factory gate, or they might look from cradle to customer, so you would include from raw material extraction all the way through to delivery to the customer. And it's worth pointing out that another way of describing a product footprint is a product life cycle assessment. So often you will see product footprints also described as product life cycle assessments. Okay, well, a company might want to measure a product's footprint for a number of reasons very similar to why they might be interested in measuring their corporate footprint. By having footprint information, you can see which parts of the life cycle of the product produce the largest environmental impacts. And once you have that information, then you can target those stages of the life cycle to reduce those environmental impacts. And moving on from that, companies might also be interested in producing a product footprint, again, so they can set reduction targets and measure progress over time. And they might also want that information so they can communicate it to consumers or possibly investors and make marketing claims about whether they're reducing the footprint of their products or whether their products are low carbon or low environmental impact products relative to a competitor's carbon footprint. So it's a difficult question in terms of how useful product footprint information is to consumers. One issue is that there's a big question over whether consumers really understand when they see the information on the environmental or carbon footprint of a product. And there have been surveys that have looked at this and asked consumers whether they understand the information. And it seems that at the moment there is a reasonably low level of understanding. People will see a product footprint number like 75 grams of CO2e per product, and it's quite hard to interpret that information and decide whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. And in many cases, consumers might just be happy to see that there is a number there and that some effort has gone into calculating the footprint without necessarily understanding whether the numerical information means that the product is good or bad or average. So that's an issue in terms of consumer understanding, which might well develop over time. But another issue with how useful life cycle or product footprint information is to consumers is that, as with corporate footprints, the boundary of the footprint information means that it doesn't necessarily capture the total change in environmental impacts depending on the decision that the customer makes. So if a customer decides to buy a particular product rather than another product, the change in environmental impacts isn't the difference between the footprint information for those two products. And that's because lots of other factors come into play. When you make a decision, your decision can have an effect on market prices, and if your withdrawal of demand for one product means the price of that product goes down, it might mean that a consumer somewhere else just buys more of that now cheaper product. And so you can't necessarily decide that making that consumer choice has the effect that the product footprint information might lead you to believe. So again, in exactly the same way with corporate footprints, it's very important to be careful about how you interpret life cycle or product footprint information.